The council room was filled with the low hum of voices, the air thick with tension. Around a massive round table, military leaders from all across the galaxy sat, discussing the state of the war. The room was a mix of different alien species, each with their own views and culture. But there was one thing they all agreed on: humanity was losing the war. In the center of the room, standing like a forgotten relic, was the Vanguard. The ancient warship, now gathering dust, was nothing more than a faded memory of a time long past. It had been built centuries ago, when humanity's forces were at their peak. Its once glorious metal hull was now scratched and rusted, its weapons outdated. The Vanguard had once been a symbol of hope for the human race, but now it was considered little more than a joke. A few of the alien commanders looked at it with mockery, their voices dripping with laughter. "Is this a joke?" one of them said, his alien tongue twisting the words. "This ship is older than my grandmother's homeworld." Another commander, a large reptilian species, let out a deep, mocking chuckle. A ship from a long-lost age, with no real purpose anymore. What could this ship possibly do against the mighty forces of the Alliance? The human officer standing next to the Vanguard, Captain Alec Johnson, felt his face flush. He had heard these insults before, but it still stung. The ship was his responsibility now, and despite all the laughter and ridicule, he believed there was more to the Vanguard than anyone realized. "It may be old," Captain Alec said, his voice steady but firm, "but there is still power inside this ship. Power that none of you have seen yet." The alien commanders didn't take him seriously. Some looked away, shaking their heads. Others stared at the Vanguard, as if it were a child's toy, unworthy of their attention. "What could a rusting hulk like this do?" another officer sneered. "It's just a waste of space." But Alec knew something they didn't. He knew the Vanguard had been built with technology far ahead of its time, hidden deep within its systems. And though no one could see it, he felt it in his gut. This ship was more than just an old war machine. It had been designed for something greater, something the galaxy wasn't ready for. He walked over to the ship, running his hand over the cool surface of its hull. The ship seemed to hum under his touch, as if it was waking up from a long slumber. It wasn't dead. It wasn't useless. It was simply waiting for the right moment to show what it could really do. The rest of the commanders continued to laugh, dismissing the human officer's words. One of them, an aging blue-skinned alien, waved his hand in the air. "Enough of this nonsense. The Vanguard is nothing more than a symbol of your failed empire. It's time you faced the truth, human." Alec's heart sank, but he stood tall. He wasn't going to let their mockery break his resolve. He had been given the command of the Vanguard for a reason. He had always believed in its power, in its hidden potential, even when no one else did. He took a deep breath. "You can mock it all you want, but when the time comes, when we face the enemy, this ship will be ready, and you will see its power, whether you believe it or not." The room fell silent. The mocking laughter stopped, but no one seemed to believe him. In the eyes of the other commanders, Alec was just a young officer clinging to an old, useless warship. The Vanguard was not a weapon. It was a memory. And memories, no matter how grand, were not enough to win a war. As Alec stood there, the weight of the room's disbelief pressing on him, he felt a flicker of doubt in his chest. Could he really bring this ship back to life? Could the Vanguard truly live up to the legends, the stories of its glorious past? Or was it just an old relic, doomed to be forgotten? But then, he remembered why he had chosen to fight for this ship. Why, despite the laughter, despite the doubt, he had refused to abandon it. The Vanguard had been built for a purpose that the galaxy was still blind to. Alec had read every record, every file on the ship's original design, and he knew that if he could just unlock its true potential, the Vanguard could change everything. As the other commanders left the room, still chuckling under their breath, Alec stayed by the Vanguard. The ship's lights flickered on, casting a dim glow across the room. Alec couldn't help but feel a strange connection to it. It was like the ship was calling to him, urging him to discover what it was truly capable of. He looked one last time at the ship, then turned to leave. But as he walked away, a small voice inside him whispered, "This ship is not done yet. Not by a long shot." The Vanguard sat in the darkened hangar, quiet and still, as if it was asleep. Outside, the galaxy's war raged on. Ships fought, stars burned, and entire civilizations fell. Yet in this forgotten corner of the galaxy, the Vanguard had been abandoned, mocked, and left behind. Captain Alec Johnson stood at the control panel in front of the ship. His fingers hovered over the switches, a deep sense of uncertainty in his chest. The other commanders didn't believe in the ship. They saw it as a relic. But Alec knew that the Vanguard still had a purpose, something that no one else could see. A small beep from the console broke the silence, followed by a soft hum. Alec's heart skipped a beat. The ship was responding. Is this it? Alec whispered to himself. Is it finally waking up? The Vanguard had been quiet for so long. It was as if the ship had been waiting for the right moment, for the right commander to believe in it. And now, Alec felt that moment was here. He pressed the button to bring up the main systems. The lights inside the ship flickered on, dim at first, then brighter. The ancient machinery slowly began to hum to life. The control systems powered up, one by one. Alec watched with wide eyes, feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. He had waited so long for this. Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed through the hangar as the engines of the Vanguard came online. The sound was not just the noise of old machines starting up. It was something more. It was power. The ship was alive. Alec's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he could almost hear the voice of the ship itself, calling to him, urging him forward. The Vanguard was more than just metal and wires. It had been built with something far more powerful, something that no one had unlocked in centuries. He quickly ran through the ship's systems, checking everything. The weapons, the shields, the communication systems, they were all slowly coming back online. It was as if the ship was shaking off the dust of its long slumber, ready to fight once again. But something was strange. As the systems powered up, Alec noticed a fluctuation in the energy readings. The ship was drawing more power than it should. The Vanguard was using energy from an unknown source, something beyond the normal systems. It wasn't just any old warship. It was different. Alec's mind raced as he tried to understand what was happening. What kind of power was the Vanguard drawing from? And why had no one realized this before? "Captain." A voice came through the intercom, breaking his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Noravalan, one of Alec's most trusted officers. "What is it, Lieutenant?" Alec replied, his voice tense with the excitement of discovery. "We've got a problem. A fleet of enemy ships just entered the sector. They're on a direct course to this location." Alec froze. His heart skipped a beat. The enemy fleet, so close. If the Vanguard wasn't ready, they'd be finished before they even had a chance. But then, Alec looked back at the control panel. The ship was still powering up. It wasn't ready yet, but maybe it didn't need to be. Maybe the Vanguard had more hidden power than anyone realized. "Lieutenant," Alec said, his voice steady and calm, "prepare the ship. We're going to meet them head-on." He didn't know how, but something in his gut told him that the Vanguard was ready. It was time to prove everyone wrong. It was time to show the galaxy that the Vanguard wasn't just a relic. It was a force to be reckoned with. As the Vanguard systems powered up and the enemy fleet approached, Alec stood tall, his resolve stronger than ever. The time for mockery was over. The Vanguard was no longer a forgotten relic. It was a legend waiting to be reborn. The tension inside the Vanguard's command center was palpable. The lights flickered as the ship's power systems surged with life, and the once silent corridors now hummed with energy. Alec Johnson stood at the front, watching the view screen as the enemy fleet advanced. His fingers gripped the controls, heart racing, but his mind was sharp and clear. Enemy fleet, 15,000 kilometers in closing, reported Lieutenant Nora Vallon, her voice calm but tense. She was standing by the radar station, eyes glued to her display. They'd got us outgunned. Alec didn't need to look at the screen to know the odds. The enemy fleet was huge, a collection of warships that outnumbered the Vanguard by a factor of 10. But there was something different about this moment, something Alec couldn't quite explain. The Vanguard wasn't just another ship. It wasn't just metal and weapons. It was something more. "Prepare the weapons," Alec ordered, voice steady. "Activate the shields, and bring the engines to full power." "Aye, Captain," Lieutenant Vallon replied, tapping away at the control panel. The Vanguard's energy shields flickered to life, casting a protective blue glow around the ship. The weapons systems powered up, their humming sound growing louder as the ship prepared for battle. Alec felt the ship vibrating beneath his feet, a sense of purpose emanating from the very walls. But the enemy was coming. Fast. Alec turned to the forward view screen, watching as the enemy ships grew larger. They were within striking range now. He had no time to second-guess himself. He had to make his move. "Fire the main cannons," Alec ordered, his voice sharp. The Vanguard's massive cannons roared to life. The sound shook the ship as the first volley of energy blasts tore through the void of space, heading straight for the oncoming enemy fleet. At first, nothing happened. The enemy ships didn't even flinch. Alec frowned. He had expected the shields to take some damage, but the enemy vessels simply absorbed the fire without any visible reaction. His heart sank for a moment. Had they been too confident? But then, something incredible happened. The Vanguard's cannons charged again, faster this time. The energy pulses hit their target, and this time, the enemy ships started to crack. Their shields flared with bright sparks as they struggled to hold up against the Vanguard's relentless assault. "Shields are holding," Lieutenant Vallon shouted. "We've breached their front line. Captain, they're on the defensive now." Alec's eyes widened in disbelief. The Vanguard, a ship no one had believed in, was actually holding its ground. Not only that, it was forcing the enemy to back off. "Full speed ahead," Alec shouted. "Let's show them what this ship can do." With a powerful burst, the Vanguard surged forward, its engines glowing brightly as it closed the gap between it and the enemy fleet. The enemy ships scrambled to adjust, their weapons firing at the Vanguard in a futile attempt to stop its advance. But it was too late. The Vanguard was already on top of them. Alec stood tall, his hands steady on the controls. The once-forgotten ship was now alive, a force of destruction. The enemy fleet was no longer an overwhelming threat. In just a few moments, it had become clear the Vanguard was no ordinary vessel. It was a ship of power, a ship that could turn the tide of war in an instant. The Vanguard's weapons fired again, this time with devastating precision. The first enemy ship exploded in a flash of fire and debris. Another ship was torn apart by a blast from the Vanguard side cannons. It was a slaughter, and the enemy was scrambling to get their forces together. "Direct hit," Lieutenant Vallon reported. "The enemy is retreating. They're abandoning the battle." Alec's heart pounded in his chest. He had done it. The Vanguard had done it. It had taken on a fleet of warships, and it had come out victorious. But even as he allowed himself a moment of triumph, Alec knew the battle wasn't over. The Vanguard had proven itself, but there would be more enemies, more challenges, and this time they would know exactly what kind of ship they were up against. He turned to Lieutenant Vallon, his expression serious. "Prepare for the next wave. We're not done yet." The Vanguard's victory had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. News of the lone ship that had defeated an entire enemy fleet was on every news channel, in every war room, and on the lips of every commander. For some, it was an unbelievable tale, a story too good to be true. But the Vanguard's firepower spoke for itself. Alec Johnson stood at the bridge of the Vanguard, staring out into the cold expanse of space. The victory had been decisive, but it had also raised new questions, questions that Alec couldn't ignore. "What's our next move, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Valen. She had a look of concern on her face. She was proud of the Vanguard's success, but she also knew that victory came at a cost. The galaxy had seen what they were capable of, and that meant they would now be hunted. Alec turned to her, his expression unreadable. He knew the truth. Enemies wouldn't simply retreat. They would come for them, seeking revenge. And as much as he wanted to enjoy the Vanguard's victory, he knew that it was only the beginning. "We wait," Alec said quietly, his voice sharp and deliberate. "We prepare for what's to come." Even as he spoke those words, the silence of space felt suffocating. The Vanguard had destroyed one enemy fleet, but the galaxy was vast. Alec knew that if the enemy had the strength to launch such an attack, they would surely regroup. And when they did, they wouldn't make the same mistake twice. "Sir, we've detected an incoming fleet." Valen's voice cut through Alec's thoughts. She turned to the radar station, her hands moving quickly over the controls. "It's larger than the last one. They're not taking any chances." Alec felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had been hoping for more time, more preparation. But the enemy wasn't going to give them that luxury. The war was far from over. "Raise the shields," Alec ordered, his voice steady but filled with determination. "Prepare for battle." The Vanguard's energy shields hummed to life once again, a familiar sound that filled Alec with both comfort and dread. The ship was ready, but was he? He couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Every decision, every move they made, could mean life or death for everyone aboard. The enemy fleet came into view on the radar, a huge force, much larger than what they had faced before. Hundreds of ships, advanced warships equipped with weapons that could tear apart the Vanguard in seconds. But Alec wasn't afraid. He had learned that the Vanguard was no ordinary ship. It was more than just metal and firepower. It was a symbol that gave hope to those who had none. "Target their lead ships," Alec ordered, his voice calm and calculated. "Let's make sure they know who they're dealing with." The Vanguard's cannons charged, the energy gathering with each passing second. Alec's eyes locked onto the view screen, watching as the enemy fleet grew closer. The tension in the air was thick, the quiet before the storm. The first blast of energy erupted from the Vanguard's cannons, streaking through space like a deadly bolt of lightning. The lead enemy ship exploded in a massive ball of fire. Alec could almost hear the shockwave in the silence of space, and he could see the fear spreading through the enemy fleet. They had been expecting another easy victory, but instead, they were met with the force of the Vanguard. "Direct hit," Lieutenant Valen shouted. "They're in retreat. The fleet is pulling back." For a moment, Alec allowed himself a brief breath of relief. But he knew better than to let his guard down. The enemy fleet was larger, but this time, they had learned the Vanguard's power. They would adapt. "We've only delayed the inevitable," Alec muttered to himself. "We need to prepare for more." And so, the battle raged on. The Vanguard had proven itself once again, but the enemy was relentless. Alec knew this was just the beginning of a much larger war, one that would test everything he and the crew had fought for. The galaxy would never forget what they had seen that day. The Vanguard was no longer a relic of the past, but a force to be reckoned with. As the Vanguard engaged in battle once more, Alec's thoughts drifted to the future. What would the galaxy become after this? Would there be peace, or was this just the beginning of an endless cycle of war? There was no easy answer, but Alec knew one thing for sure. The Vanguard would always be at the forefront. The battle had been hard-fought, but the Vanguard stood tall. Its crew, though exhausted, were proud. They had turned back an enemy fleet and sent a message across the galaxy. Humanity was not to be underestimated. But as the days passed and the Vanguard traveled through the stars, something unsettling lingered. It wasn't the fear of a battle lost or won. It was the silence. The enemy had retreated, but the feeling that something far worse was waiting for them never left. Alec Johnson stood at the ship's observation window, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. The stars seemed distant, unreachable, and cold. He could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing down on him, the responsibility of what they had done. They had won a battle, yes. But what about the war? Captain, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Valen, her tone serious as always. We've received a new transmission. It's strange. Alec turned to face her, his brow furrowed. What kind of transmission? It's encrypted, she said, handing him a datapad. We've never seen anything like it before. It's not from any known military force. Alec's eyes scanned the message. The words made no sense. They were a jumble of symbols and numbers, unrecognizable to human eyes. But there was one part of the transmission that stood out, a symbol. It was an unfamiliar sigil, something Alec had never seen before. But something about it stirred a memory in the back of his mind. Get me the ship's eye, Alec ordered, his voice tight with urgency. We need to decode this. Moments later, the ship's eye, an advanced system that had been designed to assist in every aspect of Vanguard's operations, began working on the transmission. Alec watched the screen, his fingers tapping nervously on the console. His heart raced as the AI processed the encrypted message. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the AI spoke. Captain, the transmission has been decoded. It is a warning. A warning? Alec repeated. His mind raced. From who? The AI paused before responding. It is not from any known civilization, Captain. The message warns of a threat far greater than any we have faced before, a force unlike anything in the galaxy. It is coming. Alec felt his stomach drop, the threat greater than anything they had faced before. The thought alone was enough to send a chill down his spine. He had known that the Vanguard's victory would have consequences, but he hadn't expected this. He had no idea what was coming, but the warning was clear. They were not alone in the stars. Can we trace the source of the transmission? Alec asked, his voice low. The AI processed the information again, its lights flickering. Negative, Captain. The signal appears to come from a region of space that is completely unknown. There is no way to pinpoint its origin. So, we're blind. Alec muttered, his mind whirling. We're flying into the unknown with no idea what we're up against. I'm afraid so, the AI confirmed. The threat is imminent, Captain. We have little time. Alec took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He was a soldier, a commander, but this was beyond anything he had trained for. The Vanguard had fought fleets, erased enemies, and defended the helpless. But this was something new, something far worse. We'll be ready, Alec said, his voice firm, though doubt lingered in his mind. Set a course for the unknown sector. We need to investigate. Prepare the crew. Valen's voice broke through the silence. Are we truly ready for this, Captain? Alec looked out into the stars again, his thoughts swirling. The Vanguard was the most advanced ship humanity had ever built. But was that enough? Could they face a force they knew nothing about? We don't have a choice, he said. The enemy is out there, and we're the only ones who can stop it. The tension on the bridge grew. The crew had followed Alec into the unknown before, but this time it felt different. The message, the warning, it wasn't just about the enemy fleet they had destroyed. It was something far bigger, and as the Vanguard set its course for the uncharted sector, Alec couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The crew worked quickly, preparing for what might be the most dangerous mission they had ever faced. They didn't know what awaited them, but they were ready for anything. As the ship entered faster than light travel, Alec couldn't help but wonder, what if the message wasn't just a warning? What if it was a countdown? A countdown to something that would change everything. The unknown stretched out before them, vast and silent. The Vanguard had erased an empire, but this time the enemy was unseen. And Alec knew, deep down, that the Vanguard's story was far from over. This was just the beginning. The Vanguard drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space. Its crew had gathered for the briefing, their faces grim with worry. They had set a course toward the unknown sector, following the cryptic message. But no one truly knew what awaited them. Every moment felt like a countdown. Alex stood at the head of the table, scanning the faces of his officers. The weight of command had never been heavier. This was different from anything they had faced before. The threat they were about to encounter was unlike any enemy fleet or empire they had ever fought. They were walking into the dark. "Captain," Valen's voice broke the silence. She stood up, looking at the star map displayed on the table. "We're approaching the sector. I can't say for sure what's out there, but the readings are off the charts. It's unusual." "What do you mean, unusual?" Alec asked, stepping closer. The map showed a vast empty space, too quiet, too still. His gut twisted. Something wasn't right. "The energy readings," Valen continued, tapping the map. "There's a power source coming from this area. But it's not like anything we've ever seen. It's not a ship, not a station. It's something else." Alec's heart raced. They were close. The unknown was closer than ever. And with it, the possibility of something they couldn't fight, couldn't stop. The crew looked uneasy, glancing at each other. No one spoke, but the fear was palpable. They all knew they were walking into danger. "Take us in slowly," Alec ordered. "Let's not make any sudden moves. We don't know what we're dealing with yet." As the Vanguard slowly edged closer to the mysterious energy source, the tension on the bridge grew. Every officer stood at their station, eyes glued to their screens, hands hovering over controls. The silence was deafening. The ship moved through the darkness, like a shadow slipping past unseen. The sudden beep of the proximity alarm shattered the stillness. Alec's head snapped up, his eyes sharp. "Captain, we've detected something," Valen said, her voice tense. "Show me," Alec demanded. On the screen, a new image appeared, a mass, dark and moving, appearing as if from nowhere. It wasn't a fleet, it wasn't a station, but it was massive, impossibly so. Alec's pulse quickened as he studied the strange object. It had no known structure, no markings, no clear shape. It seemed to be alive, or at least, that's how it felt. "What is that?" Lieutenant Riggs asked, his voice filled with awe. "I don't know," Alec replied, his mind racing. He turned to Valen. "Is it moving toward us?" "It's hard to say," she answered, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's too far out to be certain, but there's a definite shift in the energy readings. It's reacting to us." "Great," Alec muttered under his breath. "We've been noticed." As the object came closer, Alec couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary discovery. Something was watching them. Something powerful. "Captain, we've got incoming communication," Valen said, her voice strained. "It's encrypted, but I think it's from the object." Alec's heart skipped a beat. A transmission. From the unknown mass. What kind of technology could send a signal without even revealing its true nature? "Put it through," Alec ordered, his voice firm. The screen flickered, and the words appeared on the screen. They were simple, but the meaning was chilling. "Leave. Now. Or perish." The message was clear. Whatever it was, it didn't want them there. Alec's blood ran cold. The crew was silent, each person processing the words in their own way. But Alec was no longer confused. He understood one thing. Whatever this was, it was a force that could destroy them all. A force they couldn't ignore. "Full stop," Alec commanded. "Raise shields. Get ready for anything." The crew scrambled to follow orders, but the quiet tension only grew. The unknown mass was closer now. It felt as if it could reach out at any moment, like a predator stalking its prey. The Vanguard sensors were useless against it. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered. "What do we do now, Captain?" Valen asked quietly, her voice tight with fear. Alec's jaw tightened as he stared at the screen. We wait. We prepare. We don't know what's coming next, but we're not running from it. The crew, despite their fear, stood tall, ready for whatever lay ahead. Alec felt the weight of their eyes on him. They trusted him, but trust alone would not be enough to survive this. He didn't know what was about to happen, but he couldn't show weakness. He couldn't let them see fear. And then, suddenly, the object moved. It surged toward them faster than Alec thought possible, the ship shaking as if struck by an invisible force. The Vanguard's alarms screamed to life, and the crew scrambled to respond. But it was too late. The object's shadow enveloped them. Brace for impact. Alec shouted, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew there was nothing they could do to stop it. The Vanguard lurched as an intense force rippled through the ship, and for a moment, everything went black. The Vanguard had never felt so vulnerable. The darkness that surrounded them was unlike anything the crew had ever known. They had come from every corner of the galaxy to confront countless threats. But this was something else. A presence that could manipulate space itself, an unknown power they could neither see nor understand. Alec's heart raced as he regained his footing. The ship's lights flickered back on, casting eerie shadows across the bridge. The crew remained silent, eyes wide, all waiting for something, anything, to happen. Status report, Alec commanded, his voice tight with forced authority. Valen's fingers flew over her console, trying to gather data from the ship's systems. Shields are holding, for now. I'm not sure for how long. The object is still hovering, but I don't know what it wants. Can you communicate with it? Alec asked, his throat dry. Valen looked up, her expression one of frustration. I've been trying, Captain. It's not responding to any standard protocols. There's no language, no pattern. It's almost like it's ignoring us. Alec clenched his fists, eyes narrowed in thought. The unknown entity was toying with them. It had already shown its power. Now, it was waiting to see what they would do. Shut down all non-essential systems. Alec ordered. Keep everything as low profile as possible. We don't know what it's capable of. Yes, sir, Valen said, her hands working quickly. The soft hum of the ship quieted, and the crew could feel the tension in the air grow thick. Alec took a deep breath and stood, facing the window that looked out into the vastness of space. The object was still there, looming like a predator in the dark. It wasn't moving now, but Alec couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching them, studying their every move. The silence stretched on. Alec's thoughts were heavy with doubt and fear. They had encountered hostile fleets before, but they were always clear enemies. This was different. There was no face to fight, no obvious weakness to exploit. Captain, Riggs said quietly, looking up from his console. I've detected something unusual. A signal, faint, but it's there. Alec's eyes snapped to Riggs, his attention fully focused now. What kind of signal? I'm not sure, Riggs replied, squinting at his screen. It's not a standard communication. It's like a pattern, but with no recognizable language. It's definitely coming from the object. Alec didn't wait for confirmation. He strode forward to Riggs' station. Put it through, he said. The soft beeping of the signal filled the bridge, growing louder and faster. The crew's eyes widened as the tone shifted, becoming increasingly erratic, as if the object itself was trying to communicate. Then, without warning, the signal stopped. The entire bridge went silent. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Alec's mind raced. They had come this far, and yet they still didn't understand what this was, or what it wanted. He had no answers, and he couldn't offer his crew any comfort. He couldn't even promise them survival. Captain, Valen said, her voice tight. We're not alone. Alec turned sharply to face her. What do you mean? There's something inside the object, Valen said, her eyes wide with disbelief. I can feel it. I don't know how, but there's intelligence in there. Something. Ancient. The words hung in the air. Ancient. What kind of civilization could have created something so powerful? And why had they chosen now, of all times, to reveal themselves? Riggs looked up again, his face pale. Captain, there's more. The energy readings, they're spiking again. It's as if it's getting ready to do something. The entire crew held their breath. Alec's mind raced. They had to act. They had no idea what was coming, but they couldn't let this unknown force dictate their fate. They had to try to fight back. They had to survive. He turned to his officers. Prepare to move. All hands, ready for anything. We don't know what's about to happen, but we will fight. Valen nodded, and the others quickly moved to their stations, determination in their eyes. But even as they made their preparations, Alec knew in his heart that this was no ordinary battle. The force they were facing was far beyond anything they had ever encountered. And as the object's energy reached a crescendo, Alec knew that this would be a battle for their lives, and perhaps the survival of everything they had ever known. Brace for impact, Alec shouted. In the blink of an eye, the ship was rocked by a force so powerful it sent everyone sprawling to the floor. The alarm screamed in every corner of the ship, and the crew struggled to regain control. Alec pushed himself to his feet, his mind focused. The battle had just begun.